Hello, everyone. I have been loving this month. I feel like we've had so many exciting webinars and I've got to hang out with all of you so much, but thank you all for being here and welcome to Inclusive Lumio Lessons. This is going to be an accessibility make and take webinar. There has been so many features over the last year or two that we've released that really make our lessons so much more accessible for our students, and I'm super excited to dive in and really talk about it. So welcome. For those of you that might not know me, my name is Michelle. By work, I usually go by Mish. So if you see Mish anywhere, that's me. I am one of our learning and community designers. So I'm super behind the scenes working on one-pagers you might see, the Academy, the webinars, Lumio Lives. I'm also pretty active in our Lumio Educators Facebook group. And what I have on the screen there is a quick QR code that goes to my Instagram. And the reason I like to share that out is during these really short webinars, I can only tell you so many things that I love about Lumio. So if you follow me on Instagram, I do little tricks. They're like 30 to second videos there where I explain other things that I really like about Lumio. So that's Teach with Mish 3. So if you're on Instagram, go ahead and give a follow. And my goal is to make this session interactive. So in the chat and on the screen there, you will see my Lumio lesson join code. So if you've got a moment, I want you to just make the decision for yourself. Think about yourself as a learner. If you've got two screens, if you are the kind of person that needs to just sit back and observe, remember that this is going to be recorded and it'll be emailed to you. It'll also be on our YouTube channel. So if you feel like, hey, it's easier for me to just sit back and kind of watch today, don't join the class. But if you'd like to interact, if you feel like kind of navigating two different tabs is okay between our StreamYard call and then also my Lumio lesson, go ahead and join on in. You'll just go to lumioclass.com and then put in my code. If you are watching back the recording, no need. You can just sit back and watch. So I'm going to pause really quick and give everyone just a moment to join on in. And we'll get started in about 10 seconds here. You'll go to lumioclass.com, join as a guest, and my class ID is 181461. Again, not necessary, but just if you'd like to interact, that link is also in the chat. You're also welcome to interact with me in the chat as well. All right, so on today's agenda, here is kind of what I'd like to accomplish before we get going for the day. So we're going to go over some different accessibility tools that we've got in Lumio. So features like screen reader support, which is fairly new, Immersive Reader. We've got some keyboard navigation hacks for you as well, some audio tools just to really support all your learners. And then we're going to kind of dive into talking about how you can design in Lumio specifically with all of your students' needs in mind. And then we'll kind of end our call with a make and take activity so you can kind of decide based on all the different things that you see if you'd like to create something that you can walk away with and try to use in the next few weeks of school. All right, so again, if you are just in our call, feel free to comment in the chat, or if you're logged into my Lumio lesson, I'm going to go ahead and start a shout it out. And my question for you all is, how are you currently creating your lessons to make them more accessible? I love doing a shout it out with my students. When I think about all the different kinds of kids, or even adults that I might have in a session with me or in a class, raising their hand might not be for everyone, whether they're feeling shy, whether they're learning a new language, whether they've got an IEP. Speaking out loud might not be for everyone, but giving them a different entry point like so could really help a certain student to just be able to participate in a discussion. And also, because we're doing this in Lumio, all those contributions are saving, which means we can always come back to these thoughtful conversations. So the question I asked is, how are you currently creating your lessons to make them more accessible? And it looks like I started adding alt text to the Lumio images I use in my Lumio file. And so we're actually going to go over that today of how you can add alt text. But you'll notice right now that this person's contribution, I actually don't know who this belongs to. And I intentionally did that because when I think about all of my different students that I might have in a class, I'm thinking like, hey, how can I really design this to make sure all of my students are wanting to participate? So in my settings gear here, I do have display names toggled off. So maybe that gets those students, if it's anonymous, to be more inclined to participate, but I can always go back as a teacher to see exactly who made a contribution. Looks like I've got use clear and simple language. I love giving instructions both in text and with recorded audio. We're going to go over that as well. Provide readable fonts and good color contrast. I think that we really don't think about that enough about color contrast. I think even working at Lumio, it's something that I always have to think about because our colors are yellow. And so we have to, in our design, even be really thoughtful of not putting white with yellow. We always have to make sure we're using black text because that color contrast does really help. And as a former kindergarten teacher, I always think about readable fonts because we always teach that lowercase a. And even the font here, you'll notice we always call that the fake A because that's not the A that we'll teach in kindergarten. So I always like to change everything to like Comic Sans, for example. And break information into small organized sections. Thank you so much for participating in that discussion. And so we're going to move forward here. And the first thing we're going to talk about is why should we design for screen readers? Like, why are screen readers helpful? And if you've got any students in your classroom that use them, how does just some thoughtful design changes that you can do on your end really support those learners? So first and foremost, it really supports independence. If we have a group full of students, we've got all different kinds of needs in our class, we want to make sure that anything that we put in front of our students, they can navigate and interact with content independently. And we want them to not only be able to do it, but also to feel really comfortable doing it. So in a moment, we're going to take a second in activity to really design something that shows how you can make it so that any kind of student, any kind of need could really make that accessible. It also in general does improve usability for all. I'll show you all kind of towards the end of the call. I have a cheat sheet that you can use that improves keyboard shortcuts for you because I don't use a screen reader, but for me, when I'm quickly designing something, it's so nice to quickly know I can do Control S, Control B, up and down. And if you're making those compatible for screen readers, you're also making it easier for other folks to use to have those kinds of shortcuts. And last but not least, why design for screen readers? It also creates inclusive learning. So you're really creating with accessibility at the front of your mind, and it removes so many barriers so that all of your students can participate. So let's go ahead and think about what we can do. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to pop out and go into edit my session. And we're going to design something here. So I'm actually going to go into my plus button and I'm going to pop into graphic organizers. And I'm going to grab, let's say, this tables with different columns. And I'm going to choose this one with 2 columns. And I'll tell you why. Screen readers really function from top to bottom, left to right. So when I'm thinking about designing something visually for me, that right now, this is going to be easy for me to think about as I'm creating this, really moving in the sequence that a screen reader is going to function in. So again, top to bottom, left to right. So maybe I'm working with students and we're thinking about, we just finished reading a novel and I'm thinking, okay, we're going to do like a question and response activity. So I'm just going to type in the word question here. And I'm going to kind of go from top to bottom. So top to bottom, left to right, question. I'm going to also write the word answer. And again, this is kind of just giving me that visual reminder of what's the best order for me to move in across my screen in the same sequence that a screen reader will report in. And one other little thing to consider is for my students, like let's just say I'm going to put in a question. Let's say we read the book Wonder, and maybe I'll say, I think August didn't go to school until a certain grade. So why didn't August go to school for so long? Okay, so the screen reader will read that as text. But what I'm going to actually do a thoughtful design trick for a screen reader and to make this lesson more accessible for my students and more independent for them is I'm actually going to create a text box and say, type your answer here. And with their keyboard shortcuts in mind, which we'll review in a second as well, all they'll need to do is once they get here is click enter, and then it'll actually go right into them being able to type into my text box. Now, one other thing that we can do is as we're adding different things to the screen. So back when I was teaching, I was always trying to think about getting my students motivated to learn. And one of those things that I always did was, how can I encourage my students who maybe aren't so motivated to participate? And I always like to ask, like, hey, who are your favorite characters, whether it was from a book or TV show, a movie? And I always had some kiddos that really liked Spider-Man. So I might come on and I might add just a little picture of Spider-Man to just make it a little more exciting for my students. And as that image comes up, hopefully my internet cooperates here with me. I'm going to add this little guy here. Now, that's something that I added for a student. I'm thinking about like, hey, I'm making this one lesson for all my students to use, but my student that's using a screen reader, I don't want them to get confused by what that is. I had that for someone else. Here is how you can add alt text to your screen. I'm going to click on Spider-Man here, click that drop down arrow, and you'll see there is a button for alt text. Now, my student that is just working on this, they're using a screen reader, this Spider-Man might be irrelevant to them. So what I'm actually going to do is mark this as decoration. And you'll notice that now this text box that I could have typed in to describe what that item was is grayed out. And now screen reader is just going to skip right over it. But on the other hand, maybe I wanted to go in and add a check mark, let's just say. Maybe I had for some students a checklist to go back to questions that they felt really confident to share out. So what I can do is I'll add alt text and I can describe it. Like maybe if this was a math lesson and I had a pie chart and I could say, this is a pie chart divided into 3 parts with, 2 parts colored in, something like that. But for this check mark, I might just say, look, it already identified as a check mark. Identify, if I can spell today, questions you feel comfortable sharing. So I can just describe that object there so they know why it is there. Okay, again, I marked that Spider-Man as just a decorative object. It's kind of irrelevant. It's not part of the activity. It's not part of the instruction. It's simply decoration. But if I had something that was part of my lesson, I would want to make sure that I described it as well as possible. And again, that is, you always want to make sure you have that text box because it just makes it easier for a student to not have to figure out how to start typing. If it says type your answer here, click enter, they can just start to answer that question. Okay. So that's our screen reader, just kind of a really quick overlook. At the end of our call here today, I'm going to show you a one-pager that really dives even deeper into all the different things you'll need to know as you start to create intentionally for screen readers with drawings, grouping objects. We're just kind of doing like a bird's eye view of a lot of different accessibility features that we've got in Lumio. One of my favorite accessibility features that we have is different ways that you can use audio in Lumio, both on the teacher side and on the student side. And I'm going to give you an example of all 3 of these. The first one's instructional audio, as we're thinking about students as we're giving them independent work, if they're connected to Lumio with a one-to-one device. Maybe for some students, you've all had it in your classroom at some point. They're like, what did you say, Miss G? What were the instructions? And you're like, I just said those. So if you don't want to sound like a broken record, just simply put, it's a really nice way for them to just click and hear you give those directions. But it's also a way for you to also add some instructional content. So you might say for an activity, read each question and sort it into the correct bucket. As a reminder, this is what X means. And also, as you're thinking about students that might have individualized learning plans, IEPs, a very common accommodation that will be put on an IEP is actually for them to have the instructions reiterated to them multiple times. So being able to have a recording right on the screen for them of that instructional audio is really beneficial to your students. Next is also it supports with listening skills. So adding audio can help with phonemic awareness, listening skills, letter sounds, vocabulary, comprehension. Again, in just a moment, I'm going to show you quite a few different ways that you can use Lumio with different audio features. And last but not least, I think this might be my favorite, is really allowing on the student side to give them multiple means of expression. When we first started, I had you all participate in that Shout It Out, where I asked you a very simple question of, hey, how are you currently implementing accessibility in your classroom? Now, let's just say we were all in person. Some of you might want to raise your hand, but for some, maybe that's not very accessible. Maybe for me, speaking orally is something that's not my strong suit, but if you ask me to write it, if you ask me to draw about it, that might be easier for me. But As we're thinking about digital lessons as well, maybe typing is something that's hard for me. So being able to record myself as a student might be something that is really helpful, but also some fun use cases for it is really practicing your oral skills as well. So we're going to dive into a couple of examples of how you can actually use audio in Lumio. So up here, this is just one of our games. This is an initial sound sort. So if I modeled this activity, you'll notice that they are going to look at this picture here. Now that's quite small. I can't see it. So I'll click on that little blue square. It'll make it larger for me. That's a flag. And oh, I don't remember what sound that makes. So I've already recorded in the top right corner here the directions. So you'll listen, you'll look at each picture, and you're going to sort it into the two buckets. One for words that start with D and ones that start with F. Remember, F makes F and D makes D. So you're giving the directions, you're putting a little instructional content for them. Again, really being able to have your students work independently, because as they're working on this activity, if they need a reminder of A, either what to do, or B, just a little instructional support, like what sound that word or that letter makes, they have that right there. It's right at the top of their screen. So that's the instructional audio piece. Now, this is attached audio. So this is just a fun little activity where you'll notice that next to each little donut, there is a little sound recording little button there. And that's indicating that there is a sound that has been recorded and attached to this object. So another example here is they're working on word families. Now, if this is too primary of an example, maybe you are in high school and you're teaching a foreign language class, you could be using this for them to be matching vocabulary words to, an English word to a Spanish word or to a French word. That would be really nice to be able to record audio with an item. So like if I had a picture of a shirt, I could attach camiseta to it, and then they would have to match that to the word shirt wherever that would be on the page. So here what they would do is they would just listen.
Pet.
That sounded like pet. So they might listen
Cat.
to another one. Cat, and they would build that little donut box based on those activities. So that's attached audio. That's another way that you can use it from the teacher's side, is recording yourself. And again, this is a quick little primary example, but there's quite a few different ways that you can use that in upper grades as well. Now, as we're thinking about students that might be learning a new language, I put together this activity here, and this one I used instructional audio for, but it's focusing on two things: vocabulary and listening skills. So I'm not sure if this is what they're called all over the US, for example, but Illinois, that's where I was teaching. When they were testing out of the foreign language program or second language program, they would do their WIDA testing. And one of the things was their listening skills and their oral skills. So here they're learning about their positional words. So that's the vocabulary piece. And I might say in my recording, first take the vase and place it on top of the table. Place the dog toys inside of the basket. Place the dog under the table. So here, as I go back in this individual handout with my students, I'm able to see that they're practicing their listening skills because I had to listen to those instructions that I gave in that audio there, but also they're building on their vocabulary because I'm then going to go back and look at the way that they set up their scene to understand if they know what all those new words might be. So kind of like a little math lesson, because we learned about those positional words, vocabulary for a student that might be learning a new language, and then also those listening skills as well. So that's another way that you can use that instructional audio as well to test for listening and vocabulary. Now, one way that you can use it on the student side, and I always will say this because I took, growing up in junior high and in high school, I took Spanish, and I felt, and I think I've heard this a lot from other teachers, is a lot of these classes that we take, it's a lot of vocabulary practice, it's a lot of worksheets, and something that's really missing from curriculum is that oral practice when you're learning a new language. Whether you're learning English for the first time or you're learning a new second language, whatever it is, now here what a student can do is they can come into their little toolbar here. They can go into their gallery where they've got the heart, the plus, the image, and the circle. We call that button the gallery. They can go in there and they have that microphone option. So the question there was asking, record yourself with a sentence or question this student might be saying to you. So again, they're practicing their vocabulary, they're practicing those speaking skills. So I might say, let me allow to use my microphone. So I'm practicing here, I'm learning English for the first time, and I might say, hey, that's a really cool bag. Do you want to come sit with us for lunch today? And then I can add that there for my teacher to then listen to for me practicing my oral skills. So just a quick little activity that I've set up. I'm going to take a quick pause because I've shown you now 4 different audio features. Just in case anyone wanted to interact with it, I'm going to drop my teacher handout down and I can see a couple of you that are working in there in my dashboard. So this is really nice. As an individual handout, you are all working at your own pace. So you might all come up with different things. And something that I also really like to do with individual handouts is I never like to put my students on the spot if that's something that they're not comfortable with. Now, this far into the school year, I might know exactly which of my kiddos are comfortable with me sharing their work or they're comfortable raising their hand. But something that you can do with an individual handout, I see 3 of you that are in there. What you'll notice in your top right corner of your individual handout is a done button. And one way that I like to use that done button, other than just saying, hey, Ms. G, I'm done, is if you're feeling brave today and I can share your work, go ahead and hit that done button. So I'll probably ask one of you to just go ahead and hit done. Even if you're not done, no worries. Just go ahead and hit it. Thank you so much, Holly. So you'll see now on my teacher dashboard, I can see that I've got that green check mark that Holly let me know that I can share her work. So if I click on there, I can go ahead and see that if Holly was working, I can go ahead and see. I can also come in here and add some feedback. That was really great. What else can you come up with? And then what's really cool is that only Holly would see that feedback. I could make that bigger and easier to read, of course, but I can do that. Now, there is a new feature here in Lumio that I don't know if everyone has seen yet, but you now have the ability to export your PDFs. This is going to be really, really key, especially if you're working with students that might have IEPs. It's really nice to be able to export those PDFs. What you can do is maybe I just have Holly's IEP meeting coming up and I can export that. I can have a whole file of those just to kind of do some progress monitoring or show a student sample when I'm preparing for those meetings. So just so you know, you can now export those individual handouts. All right, doing okay so far. I don't see any questions. I'm going to move forward. So a moment ago, I'm actually going to come back over here and we were talking a little bit about being able to record yourself. We spoke also a little bit about, I could ask you to raise your hand and that might not be comfortable for every student. So what's really important for us as we're creating our lessons to consider is really allowing our students the multiple means of expression. What is that and what does it mean? When you think about your students, for some, you might have artistic students, and for them, maybe drawing how they're feeling or what they understood from a lesson, or maybe raising their hand and speaking orally is really good. Maybe taking a test is easier for others. There's so many different ways that we can gauge understanding with our students. For example, me, I'm not a good test taker. If you put a piece of paper in front of me, you ask me to do multiple choice, that is not my strong suit. But if you sit down and you have a conversation with me to try to understand where I'm at with my level of expertise in something, it is much easier for me as a student to explain that orally versus on a paper test. So when we think about designing our lessons with multiple means of expression, it helps to boost that engagement, because if I know that I can choose kind of what my comfort level is, I'm more inclined to engage and participate in that lesson. Then when we think about our diverse learners, you're thinking about, again, not everything is one size fits all. And for some students, whether they've got an accommodation that needs to be made, are we giving every student an entry point that makes it easier for them to participate? And it also then helps to deepen that understanding, because we're giving them the opportunity to really make that decision. And from there, we're able to gauge where they're at with their understanding. So very simply put, again, what are different ways that students can show what they know? Things like that could be taking a test, speaking, creating an art project on it, different things like that. So thinking about creating in Lumio, all I've done here is, again, I grabbed a graphic organizer that we already had. It's a brainstorming web. And what I can do now is go to my magic wand and I'm going to convert this into a whole class whiteboard. So for any of you that are logged into my lesson, think about you as a learner, and there's different ways for you to now engage with me. Now, if we were in person together, you could have raised your hand. You could have participated with me that way. For the rest of you, maybe it's easy for you to just type and you want to take a test. That's one way. So you can add in just a text box. For some, you might go in the gallery and you might record yourself because maybe, again, verbal speaking is easy for you. Typing maybe is not great for you. So I'm going to go ahead and record my answer as my submission because speaking orally is easier for me than typing. And so we've now given all these different ways. Maybe for me, I want to draw an example of what a test can look like. Maybe I don't know how to spell the word test, but I can try to explain, like, this looks like a worksheet to me. So here's some different options on my worksheet. I'm going to put the date up here. So there's different ways for our students to engage. And what's really nice is, again, because we're doing this in Lumio, all of our contributions are saving here. And what I can also do is I'm going to click right here on adding images. And I can see that contribution there was made by Holly. So I can always see who's doing what. We can always come back to these things. And just from a participation standpoint, from a classroom management standpoint, what I can also do is go ahead and toggle off editing if I needed that attention back on me. Now, here's something else that I want you to think about as you're thinking about the different types of learners that you might have in your classroom. You might have some students that are neurodivergent, and something that really supports your neurodivergent students is visuals and especially timing. So one of our features that you can pull up in your gallery as a teacher, you have your gallery button, you can click on your toolbox, and you'll notice you've got some different widgets. And if you click on the timer, I can move that, I can change the size of it. And maybe as we're getting ready to do this brainstorming web, I'll go ahead and set my timer for 2 minutes. That visual reminder really helps your students, especially your neurodivergent students, get ready for a transition that's yet to come. That is a really good reminder for them. So just little things that you can do within Lumio that really helps support your students. All right, I think this might be my last example here of something else that you can do in Lumio, and that is Immersive Reader. I'm actually going to show you an example of what it is and then how you can do it yourself on your side. So if you don't know what Immersive Reader is, it's actually a Microsoft tool that is embedded right into Lumio, and it is really awesome. So I'm going to make sure I show you guys how to turn it on, how to create in Lumio so you can make sure that your lessons will have Immersive Reader. So first and foremost, it supports different reading needs. It's meant for each student to customize it on their own. So you'll see in a moment when I change my screen that you can customize the text that I'm going to show you specifically to your needs, whether you need the text to be larger, you need to work on some audio support, you need to identify different parts of speech. It also, just from a general standpoint, really increases the access to the content. So if we're doing a read aloud, or if we're doing independent reading, or I've given a worksheet, I want to make sure that, again, my students can reach that independently. So what tools can I use with what I have to make sure that all my students can access the learning? So here in a moment, you'll see now on your screen, if you're connected with me to my Lumio lesson, I've got this passage, A Bear in the Rain. And what you'll also see if you are connected, on the left side of your screen, you'll have a little icon that looks like a book with a little audio icon next to it. And if you put your mouse over it, it says Immersive Reader. Go ahead, if you are participating in the Lumio lesson, and click on that option. So go ahead and click. You'll see that it highlights the text on the screen for me, and then you can click on it. What you'll notice now, if you're connected with me in my Lumio lesson, as my screen changes, it's not going to do the same on yours because, again, this is meant to be customized to each individual user. Our needs might not be the same. So in the top right corner, first I have my text preferences. So I might need to visually just change that text size. Maybe it's easier for me to have it smaller or larger. I can increase or decrease that spacing. Earlier, I was mentioning as a kindergarten teacher, I always like to have everything in Comic Sans because of that lowercase a. If you've got any students that are dyslexic, making it a blue theme in the background actually makes it easier for those eyes to process. So that's your text preferences. You've also got some grammar options. So you can break words apart by syllable. You can identify parts of speech, and maybe you've got an anchor chart in your classroom and nouns happen to be blue. You can go ahead and change that. And then last but not least, you've got your reading preferences. So if you've got some emerging readers, You're working with some students that maybe need some support focusing, you can do a line focus. So if it's easier for them to just kind of see that one line at a time, you can do a few lines or many. You also have access to a picture dictionary, which I love because these images are actually those from board makers. So if you've got any students that are using AAC devices, it kind of keeps that messaging consistent, which is really nice. So I'm going to click on the word bear, and you'll see that it'll give me an image here, and I can also listen to that one individual word. And back in my reading preferences, this might be my favorite part, is you can drop down and you can see that you can actually translate into quite a few different languages. I'm going to drop down to Spanish as my example. You'll notice that even for Spanish, there's 3 different dialects. So I'm going to choose Spanish Mexico, and then you can do it by word or by document. I like to do by document because then what you'll see is you can actually toggle back and forth between Spanish or back to that original version. So you might be reading and you're like, hey, think I'm ready to try out English again. You might come over here and be like, not quite ready. And you can always come right back. You can also change the speed in which it's going to read to you if you need that text read to you. And you can change the voice selection as well. And then when you click play,
un oso bajo la lluvia. Érase una vez.
It'll read it to you, highlighting each word one at a time, which just makes it really easy for your students to follow along. So exiting out of here, this was something that most of my students maybe were able to access, but as they're working independently, maybe I knew that I would have some students that would benefit from having Immersive Reader. So how do I design to make Immersive Reader accessible? So what I'm going to do is actually fully end my session. And there are a few things that you need to know on how to get Immersive Reader working. It's giving me all these pop-ups because I used a lot of our beta features, so it's asking me how I feel about them. So the first thing you're going to do, if you have not yet turned on Immersive Reader, when you are logged into Lumio as a teacher, the very first thing that you'll do is click on your icon in the top right corner. Mine is my picture. Yours might be your initials. And, oh, sorry, that's not where. I'm just joking. Right under that is a button called Edit Class. If you click on Edit Class, you'll have a button that says Manage Immersive Reader. Again, right under your icon, you've got a button that says Edit Class, and then Manage Immersive Reader is your last option. And then you can go ahead and toggle that on. And what that'll do is it'll turn on Immersive Reader for your entire profile. So it's not per lesson, it's for your profile. So any student that signs into your class will now have access to Immersive Reader if it was designed, which I'll explain in a second, to be Immersive Reader accessible. So how do I do that? There's a few different ways. I'm going to pop into my library and I'm going to click on New. And again, please feel free to take a moment to try it out as I'm going. And there is something that you need to know with Immersive Reader. If you're starting with content that you already have, you're importing something, you're going to click on Import. And you'll notice up here, I've got my computer in Google Drive because I'm a Google Drive user. So I've got that option there. But I also have those same 2 buttons right here. But now those say editable. If you want Immersive Reader to work, you are going to go ahead and use that editable option. So I already have something imported, and so I would have done editable, so that text comes in that way for me. And what I'm going to do is come back over, and here is that text. So you'll notice when I imported it, it came in as a text box for me, which means Immersive Reader will catch it. Now, if you're creating something from scratch, I'm going to click on New Blank Page. Anything that you type yourself, so a bear in the rain, anything, any text box that you add yourself will now be Immersive Reader compatible. It is not going to work on any screenshots or any imported documents that you did not use that editable feature for, because then it comes in as an image and Immersive Reader cannot read text that's in an image. Okay, so any of your own typed text. Now, some other things that I showed you that you can do is when you're creating for audio. So right in the top right corner here, you've got an icon of a little person speaking. That is where you can come in to add that instructional audio. So here is where I might say, read the passage and then go through and circle any nouns. Remember, a noun is a person, a place, or a thing. So in that instructional audio, I gave the directions, and then I also reminded them instructionally what a noun might be. So now they have that right on their screen. Again, it might be really helpful for your students to have those instructions. Anytime they need that reminder, they'll be right there for them. Now, let's say we were doing that activity where we were matching different things, like we're making that donut box for that attached audio. There's two different things you can do. You can go into your gallery. That's the same as you saw when you were in delivery mode, that heart and that plus button. And you've got your microphone right there. So you can record audio this way. And as I record, you'll notice when I'm done, I'll pause, I'll hit add audio, and that'll give me a little free floating. So I can have that anywhere on my screen. But let's just say I had brought in, I was talking about an example for maybe they're learning a new language, and I'll bring a picture of a shirt. And as that loads for me, we need some hold music. I'm going to bring that up onto my screen. So maybe we're learning a new language. Maybe we're learning the word, we're learning Spanish. What I can also do is click on that image. And what I'll do is I'll find where it says attach audio. So I'm going to attach a piece of audio specifically to this picture. Camiseta. So I've set it in Spanish, and if I was building out a matching activity, maybe I'll have that here. And I'm going to go ahead and lock that in place. My students can't move that around, but maybe on the right side over here, I'm going to go ahead and have a text box. I'll lock that in place also. And in here, I'll have all of those vocabulary words. And so what I'll do here is I'll get that drop-down menu, and what I'm going to do is allow move. There's different locking features, so I want them to be able to just move the word, not resize it. They don't need to rotate it. And so now they'll be able to move this over to label what that is saying in a different language. Just a quick little example. Or maybe that would have said camiseta, and on here I would have said shirt as that reminder as well. All right, so I've shown you quite a few different things here. Again, so let's review a lot of the different things I've shown you. For designing for screen readers, I just went in and all I did was I'm going to go ahead here, click on my graphic organizers, and we thought about different ways that we can design for that screen reader. Again, designing in mind for how a screen reader is going to operate. Top to bottom, left to right. So we went in and we added our text in the exact order that the screen reader was going to read, and anything that we brought in that was just decorative, like I had that little picture of Spider-Man, just for time's sake, I'm going to just add in this little heart, not something that needs to be read. You can always go to edit alt text, and what I'm going to do is make that just a decoration. So different things you can do for those screen readers. We reviewed different kinds of audio. So you've got your instructional audio. So if those students benefit from having the instructions read aloud, practicing listening skills, vocabulary, letter sounds, learning a new language, and practicing positional words, listening skills. We're also just on the student side, allowing our students to practice their oral skills as well. We also reviewed allowing our students to have multiple means of expression. That does make your lesson much more accessible as we're thinking about giving all of our students different entry points to participate, as well as really focusing and honing in on what their skill set is and making sure that they can show us their understanding in their best way as well. And then, of course, we also went over Immersive Reader, which just makes our text more accessible for our students as well, so that if they need or benefit from having text read to them, they've got that option as well. I don't see any questions in the chat, and we're just about to reach 40 minutes here, so I'm going to go ahead and go over some resources. So if you are someone that's brand new to Lumio, every July for 2 days, we have the coolest event ever, and it is a 2-day virtual PD event, and it is around the clock sessions that are led by teachers all over the world. So real teachers in real classrooms. There is a link in the chat there for you to register. And those are going to be on every topic you can think of, from something as simple as getting started with Lumio, using Lumio for math, for classroom management, for science, for social emotional learning, whatever it might be. Go ahead and take a look at our Lumiopalooza schedule. It just got released last week, so there's a QR code on the screen. If you're in my Lumio lesson, you can also click here, or there's also the link in the chat. And always remember that you can register even if you can't attend because you'll get those recordings sent to you. And then I also earlier mentioned that we've got some really great one-pagers to support you in your creation if you're working on screen reader support. So if you're not yet part of our Lumio Educators Facebook group, Holly's going to drop that link for you in the chat. And that is where you can go to search up. I just recently, I think like 2 weeks ago, posted both of these two one-pagers. So the first one is actually 2 pages. We say one pager, but it's 2. And that is designing Lumio lessons for screen reader support. And Holly is a rock star and actually just posted the exact link to this one pager right in the chat. And that'll walk you through everything that you need to know for designing a screen reader, from grouping objects, using the pen tool, kind of arranging things in a logical reading order. That one's really great. And then also your keyboard shortcuts. So anything that you need to do for your editing actions, for object movement, for focus management, which is really strong for accessibility. So anything that you might need is going to be in those 2 one-pagers, and Holly went ahead and posted that in the chat for us as well. And then as always, we have many different Lumio resources. Starting all the way at the right, we've got our academy where you can go to take courses to learn all about Lumio. Those are going to be redone really soon. They're going to be really exciting updates happening over there. These webinars are starting to come to an end for this school year here. I know that some of us have different school years, but we kind of take a little break in June and July and August. But in July, we have Lumio Palooza. So you'll find all those webinars on that webinar page. All our past webinar recordings you'll find on the bottom there. You also have access to our Lumio YouTube, which has a variety of 1 to 3 minute clips from something as simple as how do I get my students to join Lumio? How do I get them logged in? How do I make a game? How do I use the AI? There's lots of different little clips in there for you as well as all of our webinar recordings past. And last but not least, if you are not yet one of our ambassadors, you'll notice in the chat we've got Marit. Marit is one of our ambassadors from Finland, actually. This is a great place to stay connected and to learn. We've got ambassador virtual meetups that happen frequently. This is where you go to stay in the know and connect with folks all over the world using Lumio. It's just a great community where you can share your ideas, share your lessons. And if we ever get to see you guys in person at any conferences, we'll host different meetups, but virtually, since we're all over the world, it's just a really good place to go to get connected. You get your badge for being an ambassador, and there's also different levels of being an ambassador as well. So with that, thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you for attending the session. And in the chat, Holly has put a link to attend or to complete the survey. Remember, if you complete the survey, you will get your certificate for attending today's webinar. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I don't see any other questions. Holly dropped quite a few links there in the chat for us. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time.